I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of old paper and wax polish, mixed with a nervous tension I could almost taste. I had never imagined I would be here, standing in this massive courtroom, where silence seemed heavier than any sound could ever be. The murmurs of the crowd were low, almost hesitant, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something they didn't yet understand. I walked slowly toward the bench, trying to keep my steps quiet, but the echo of my shoes against the marble seemed to shout louder than I wanted. Every eye in the room followed me, some curious, some judgmental, some suspicious. I felt their stares like icy fingers pressing into my skin. My hands were clammy, my heart beating so fast I thought it might burst through my chest. And then, at that moment, I saw him, the judge. He froze mid-motion, his gavel suspended in the air like a frozen clock. His eyes widened, and a look of disbelief crossed his face. It was then that I realized the power of a single secret. It's the weight of a hidden truth that could change everything in one instant. No one had ever known who I really was. Not my family, not my friends, not even the people who had crossed my path in this city for years. And now, that secret was about to be revealed in the most public way imaginable. As I approached the stand, felt the whisper of tension ripple through the room. I could hear a faint shuffle of papers, the soft creak of the bench under the judge's weight, and the occasional cough from someone trying to hide their own nerves. The clerk looked at me, confusion and fear mingling in her expression. She was the first person to sense that something was off, though she couldn't yet place what it was. I still remember that feeling of my hands tightening around the edges of the podium. It was as though the world had slowed down, each second stretching into a long, torturous pause. My mind raced with memories I had buried, deep memories of a life that no one knew about. A life that was about to explode into the open. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but nothing could prepare me for the raw reality of the judge's gaze, filled with recognition, shock, and maybe even fear. The crowd leaned forward instinctively, sensing the tension but not knowing its source. I could see the lawyers exchange subtle glances, their practiced composure cracking just slightly. Somewhere in the back, a camera clicked, capturing the moment for the record. But it felt insignificant compared to the storm building between the judge and me. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, feeling the pull of something unseen and dangerous just beneath your feet. I opened my mouth to speak. And for a brief second, the room felt completely silent. Even the air seemed suspended, waiting for the revelation to come. And then I said it's the words that would change everything. My true identity. The truth I had hidden for years, whispered into the quiet like a crack of lightning splitting the sky. The judge's hand trembled as it hovered over the gavel. I could see it, the tiniest flicker of panic in his eyes. And I knew at that moment that the world as I knew it, and as everyone in that room knew it, was about to shatter. A faint gasp escaped the lips of someone behind me. I turned slightly and caught a woman's horrified expression, her eyes wide as if she had seen a ghost. The tension in the room grew heavier, almost unbearable. My heart pounded so loudly I feared it might give me away before I even finished speaking. I felt the weight of years of secrecy pressing down on me, a heavy, suffocating blanket that I had been carrying alone. And now I was finally ready to let it all go. The judge's gavel finally hit the wood. A sharp sound that seemed to echo through the courtroom like a gunshot. But instead of restoring order, it only amplified the suspense. Everyone was frozen in place, waiting, staring, unable to look away from the unfolding drama. I could feel the heat of their attention on me, each pair of eyes digging into my back, searching for the truth in my every movement, my every breath. And then, a whisper. Someone in the gallery muttered a single word almost inaudible, but enough to make my skin crawl. It was recognition, a name no one should have known, spoken by someone who had no business saying it. I froze for a moment, realizing that my carefully controlled secret had a life of its own now. It was slipping through my fingers, infecting the room with a suspense so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The judge's eyes didn't leave mine, locked in a mix of disbelief and something darker, something I couldn't yet name. The murmurs grew louder, people leaning in to catch even the faintest hint of what was coming next. And then, just as I was about to continue, a sudden, sharp sound broke the tension. A door slammed somewhere in the back of the courtroom. Heads turned. Hearts skipped. And in that split second, I knew that the next moment would change everything. I still remember that day as if it were carved into my mind. The courtroom had gone completely silent after the door slammed, leaving only the echo of that single jarring sound. My pulse was racing, each heartbeat pounding like a drum in my ears. Every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on me, some with curiosity, some with fear, and others with something I couldn't yet identify: suspicion. I could feel it crawling over me, like tiny, invisible fingers trying to pry the truth from my very bones. I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady my voice before speaking. The words I was about to utter were heavy. They carried years of secrets, lies, and hidden life experiences that I had never shared with anyone. And yet now I had no choice. The room was waiting, expecting, demanding, and the pressure was suffocating. I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze pressing down on me like a physical force. The judge, still frozen at the bench, looked like he had just seen a ghost. His hand trembled slightly as it hovered over the gavel. And I could see the recognition in his eyes, the shock that only comes when someone sees something they thought they'd never see. I took another step forward, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions spinning inside me. Fear, excitement, and a strange sense of liberation collided in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I knew I had to begin carefully. I started telling the story of who I was, slowly, deliberately, my voice barely above a whisper at first. I spoke of a life that no one in this courtroom could have imagined, a life hidden behind a mask, living among them unnoticed while carrying a secret that could destroy reputations, relationships, and even lives. As I spoke, the whispers in the room grew louder. Curiosity mingled with disbelief, and I could feel the tension tightening like a noose around everyone present. I still remember that moment when the judge's eyes darted toward the gallery, searching as if he expected someone else to step forward and explain, as if the truth could only belong to someone else. But I was the one standing there, the one holding the secret, and for the first time, I felt the sheer power of that truth. The air in the room was thick, almost suffocating, and I could see people fidgeting in their seats, shuffling papers, adjusting their positions, trying to escape the tension but unable to. The murmurs grew into soft exclamations. A lawyer on the far side of the room whispered something urgently to his colleague, their faces pale and tense. I could see the confusion and fear spreading like wildfire. And for a brief moment, I almost smiled at how perfectly my secret was unraveling. It was strange but exhilarating to witness years of carefully hidden identity breaking through in front of so many people. And then, just as I was beginning to feel a strange sense of control, a voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. It was calm but sharp, and it carried a weight that made everyone freeze. "You're lying." I froze mid-sentence. My head snapped toward the source. It was a woman sitting in the third row, someone I had known casually but never trusted completely. Her eyes were narrow, suspicious, as if she had been waiting for this moment to challenge me. My stomach tightened, and I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I realized then that my revelation had triggered something. Someone knew more than they should. The judge's hand trembled slightly over the gavel again. He looked at me, then at her, and back again, as if trying to reconcile the impossible. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in with the weight of anticipation. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown to something terrible or extraordinary. I couldn't tell which, but I knew the outcome would change everything. I took a step closer, my voice steadier this time, though my hands were still shaking. "I'm not lying," I said, letting my words echo across the silent room. "Everything I'm telling you is the truth. You just weren't ready to see it." Her eyes widened, and she glanced at the crowd as if looking for support. But the crowd seemed frozen in place, caught between disbelief and fascination. I could see the faintest traces of fear in her expression, and it was then I realized just how far my secret had reached. It wasn't just about MIT, it was about everyone who had touched my life in ways they didn't understand. I still remember the sound of the gavel hitting the bench sharply again, jolting me slightly. The judge's voice cut through the tension, demanding silence. But even he couldn't suppress the electricity in the room. The whispers had returned, growing louder, as if everyone wanted to hear the next part of my story, to discover what had been hidden from them for so long. I felt my chest tighten as I realized the magnitude of what was happening. I had expected shock, maybe some disbelief, but I hadn't expected this level of chaos. People were looking at each other, eyes wide, faces pale. Phones were being discreetly raised to record, cameras clicking silently in the background. And somewhere deep in the gallery, I heard another voice murmur my name, a voice that I hadn't heard in years. A voice that carried its own secret, its own weight. And then, just as I was about to continue explaining, the woman in the third row stood up suddenly. The entire courtroom turned to her in unison, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Her eyes locked on mine, and there was a dangerous glint in them, something I hadn't seen before. She opened her mouth, and everyone leaned in to hear. But before she could speak, the lights flickered, plunging the room into a brief, disorienting darkness. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, and in that fraction of a second, I felt the tension spike to unbearable levels. When the lights returned, she was gone. Completely gone. The seat was empty, as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving only a stunned silence behind. The judge blinked rapidly, as if questioning reality itself. Murmurs erupted again, louder this time, and I realized that the game had changed. The secrets I had brought into this room were no longer just mine. They were intertwined with mysteries I hadn't even anticipated. And at that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. What had started as a revelation of my identity was about to spiral into something much bigger. Something none of us could have predicted. I still remember that night as if the shadows themselves had carved it into my mind. The courthouse felt different now, almost alive, like it was holding its breath along with me. The sudden disappearance of the woman had left a strange, heavy silence in the room. People were whispering to each other, pointing fingers, shaking their heads. Nobody could explain what had just happened. Even the judge, who had seemed so steady moments ago, now looked pale, uncertain, and slightly frightened. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. My legs felt heavy, as if the floor itself was trying to hold me down, warning me not to go further. But I knew I had to. I had to continue speaking, continue revealing the truth I had kept hidden for so long. The secret I carried wasn't just about MIT, it was about the ripple of events, decisions, and lies that had shaped so many lives. And now everyone in this room would know. One way or another, I still remember the way the light fell through the high windows, casting long lines across the polished wood. The courtroom felt smaller, more suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. The murmurs had grown louder, and I could feel dozens of eyes piercing into my back, each one demanding, questioning, judging. My throat tightened. I could feel my hands trembling, but I clenched them into fists to stop them. I had rehearsed this moment, but nothing could prepare me for the raw intensity of the room's attention. I began to speak again, a voice low but steady. I told them about my past, the hidden life I had led in plain sight, the decisions I had made to protect not only myself but others who had unknowingly become part of a dangerous secret. I spoke of fear and betrayal, of moments when I had to make impossible choices, and of the guilt I had carried silently for years. With each word, I could feel the energy in the room shift. Some people were leaning forward, captivated. Others were recoiling, horrified at what they were hearing. The judge's eyes never left mine. I could see the conflict in his face, the struggle between his duty, disbelief, and the dawning realization that everything he thought he knew was wrong. He swallowed hard and adjusted his robe as if trying to remind himself that he was still in control. But I could see through it. He wasn't in control. None of us were. and then as I continued, I heard it had faint creaking behind me. A door opening softly, just enough to make me tense. I turned slightly, trying to see without breaking my flow. That same woman had returned. Her expression was calm, almost unreadable, but her eyes were fixed on me, filled with a mixture of recognition and warning. She didn't speak, but her presence alone sent a shiver down my spine. I still remember the cold sweat forming at the back of my neck. My mind raced. How did she find her way back here so quickly? And more importantly, how did she know? She wasn't just any witness, she was part of the secret I had been hiding. Someone who had seen the truth long before anyone else. The realization hit me hard. My carefully built world of lies and disguises had a leak. And now that leak had returned to challenge me publicly. The murmurs in the room grew louder. People were starting to notice her again, whispering to each other, pointing discreetly. Cameras were clicking. Phones were being lifted to record. But the courtroom was no longer just a place for lit, had turned into a stage for revelation, suspense, and fear. And I was at the center of it. I could feel the judge shifting in his seat as if trying to regain some semblance of authority. He raised his gavel, but paused, uncertain. Everyone was waiting for him to demand silence, but he couldn't bring himself to. The energy in the room was too thick, too electric. And then, from somewhere in the back, I heard another sound, soft, deliberate, almost menacing. Footsteps. Slow, measured. Approaching, I felt my chest tighten. I didn't know who it was, but instinct told me that this was no ordinary visitor. This was someone who belonged to the darker corners of my past, someone whose presence could tip everything into chaos. My mind raced with questions, each more terrifying than the last. Had they been watching me all this time? Were they the reason my secret had remained hidden, or were they the ones trying to destroy me now? I still remember the smell of the polished wood mixed with the faint scent of fear in the air. Every nerve in my body was on edge. My eyes flicked to the gallery, to the empty spaces where people had once sat, to the door through which the footsteps echoed. And then I felt it a cold draft, like a warning brushing across my skin. Someone was in the room. Someone who had no right to be there, and just as I was about to turn fully to confront whatever was approaching, the woman in the third row raised her hand slightly, as if signaling me to stop. Her eyes locked onto mine. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She shook her head slowly, her expression dark, urgent, filled with a warning I couldn't yet understand. Then, without a word, she slipped into the shadows near the door, disappearing again before anyone could notice. And in that instant, I realized the truth. The courtroom was no longer just a place for revelation. It had become a battleground. My secret had awakened forces I could not yet see. And my life, everything I had worked to protect, was about to change forever. I still remember that night like a shadow that never left my mind. The courtroom, once a place of order and law, now felt like a stage set for chaos. Every whisper, every movement seemed amplified. My heart was racing, pounding so loudly I was certain the entire room could hear it. The sudden presence of someone unseen had unsettled me. But it wasn't just for I felt something darker, something dangerous. Creeping closer with every passing second, I tried to focus on my story, to continue revealing the truth about who I really was. But my words faltered, stuttering against the weight of the moment. The judge's eyes were fixed on me, yet somewhere beneath his composed exterior I could see a flicker of fear. He didn't yet know the full story, but I could tell by the way he kept glancing at the door that something was about to happen that none of us could control. I still remember the sound of the woman's heels clicking softly on the marble floor as she reappeared, moving like a ghost. Her eyes locked onto mine, and this time could see more than recognition. They were filled with warning, urgency, and something else I couldn't name. A shadow of fear I had never seen before. It was as if she knew the danger that had just entered the room and was trying to alert me without drawing the attention of the others. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, and continued speaking. I told him about the life I had hidden, the choices I had made to survive, and the truth I had carried silently for years. I described the moments when my identity had almost been exposed. the threats I had faced, and the reasons I had been forced to remain invisible. As I spoke, I could feel the weight of the room's attention pressing down on me. The crowd leaned in, spellbound, some shocked, some horrified, and some simply unable to tear their eyes away. And then it happened. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate, measured. They weren't random. They weren't accidental. They were coming closer, and I could feel the tension in the room spike. Every eye seemed to catch the movement, but no one spoke. The woman's gaze shifted slightly toward the source, her body stiffening. My pulse quickened. I could feel the danger, sharp and real. Like a knife pressed against my ribs. I still remember the cold draft that swept across my neck, raising goosebumps on my arms. My instincts screamed at me, telling me to turn, to run, to confront whatever threat had entered. But I stayed rooted in place, forced by a combination of fear and resolve. I had come here to reveal the truth, and I would not let anyone or anything stop me then. I heard it, a whisper, low and menacing, coming from the shadow near the door. It was a voice I recognized, though I couldn't place it immediately. "You shouldn't have come back." The words were calm, almost casual, but they carried an unmistakable threat. I felt my chest tighten and my stomach churned. The woman in the third row stiffened visibly, her eyes darting toward the door, her fingers gripping the edge of the seat as if bracing herself for what was about to happen. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. There was no answer. Only silence, thick and heavy, pressing down on the room like a physical weight. Every second felt like an eternity. And then, without warning, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness for a brief moment. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, and I could feel the panic spreading like wildfire. When the lights returned, I froze. The shadow near the door had moved closer, too close. Someone was standing just at the edge of the courtroom, unseen by most. Yet I could feel their presence like a living thing pressing against me. My mind raced. Who was this person? How did they know about me? And why had they waited until now to appear? I still remember the way my heart felt like it had stopped for a moment. The judge's gavel trembled in his hand as if he, too, sensed the danger. The murmurs of the crowd had turned into anxious whispers, people shifting nervously in their seats. I could feel the air in the room thickening, heavy with fear, anticipation, and the electricity of something about to explode. The woman in the third row suddenly stood up again. Her movements deliberate and swift. She looked directly at me, her eyes wide with urgency. She was trying to warn me, but this time it wasn't subtle. She pointed toward the shadow by the door, her lips moving in a silent command. I understood instantly whatever was about to happen was dangerous. I had to act fast. Before I could take a step, the courtroom door burst open with a loud crash. Everyone jumped, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. All eyes turned toward the entrance, and my stomach sank as I saw the figure that had been lurking in the shadows. Their face was partially hidden, but I could feel their eyes locked on me. Recognition, menace, and power radiated from them. And I knew in that instant that my secret had finally attracted someone who could destroy everything. I still remember the sharp, electric tension in the room, the way it seemed to vibrate through the floor and into my bones. The judge was frozen, the crowd stunned. And I realized that the next moments would determine the course of everything I had built. I had stepped into a game far bigger than I had imagined. And now the pieces were moving faster than I could control. And then the figure took a slow step forward. Their voice, when they spoke, was calm but deadly. "It's time you paid for what you've done." I still remember that day, like a storm I couldn't escape. The courtroom had become a place of tension so thick you could almost touch it. The figure standing at the entrance radiated menace, and I could feel every eye in the room shifting toward them, trying to comprehend the danger that had suddenly appeared. My stomach twisted, and a cold sweat ran down my back. I knew instinctively this person wasn't here by accident. They knew. They had known all along. I took a step back. but the wooden floor beneath my feet seemed heavier than ever, holding me in place. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had come here to reveal my truth, to face the consequences of my hidden life. But nothing in my preparation had accounted for this, someone who could turn my revelation into a weapon. Someone who had been waiting for me all along. I still remember the sharp sound of the gavel as the judge tried to regain control, though his hand shook visibly. "Order in the court," he called, but even his voice lacked the authority it usually carried. The energy in the room had shifted entirely. It was no longer about legality or procedure, it was about survival. The figure stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, as if they were playing a game only they understood. Their face was still partially obscured, but I could feel the weight of their gaze on me, heavy and dangerous. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. They knew details about my life that no one else could possibly know. Every secret I had carried, every decision I had made to stay hidden, every lie I had told, they knew it all. I still remember the way the woman in the third row reacted. She had been my silent ally, trying to warn me, to guide me through this dangerous revelation. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and urgency. She mouthed words I couldn't hear, but the meaning was clear. "Be careful. This is bigger than you think." My chest tightened, and I felt the tension in my shoulders. The room seemed to shrink around me. Every sound amplified the murmurs of the crowd. The shuffle of feet, the soft creak of the judge's chair. My mind raced, trying to anticipate what this person would do next. Were they here to expose me completely? To destroy the life I had carefully built? Or was there a purpose, something far more personal? I still remember the moment the figure finally spoke. Their voice was low, deliberate, and every word seemed to carry a weight of menace. "You thought you could hide forever," they said, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "But now the truth has caught up with you." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to respond. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" My voice wavered slightly, betraying the fear I tried to hide. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they scanned the room, their eyes landing on the judge, the lawyers, and the crowd. And then, with a slow, almost theatrical motion, they raised a hand and revealed a folder I instantly recognized. It contained documents, photos, and evidence that could shatter the delicate balance of my hidden life in an instant. I still remember the icy feeling creeping through my veins. The folder wasn't just proof, it was a key, a weapon, a tool that could unravel everything I had done. And I knew without a doubt that the figure had spent years preparing this moment. They had been waiting for me to reveal myself, to step into the light so that they could strike with perfect timing. The crowd in the courtroom had gone completely silent, sensing the gravity of the moment. Even the judge, who had always been composed, looked shaken, unsure of how to proceed. I could feel the tension pressing against me like a physical force. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to escape, to hide, but I couldn't. I had come too far, risked too much. The truth had to be faced. And I was standing at the epicenter of a storm I couldn't control. I still remember the way the woman in the third row suddenly stood up again, her face pale but determined. She moved swiftly toward the front of the courtroom, positioning herself between me and the figure. Her eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of reassurance amidst the fear. "Stay calm," her lips silently mouthed. "Don't let them control you." The figure didn't back down. Instead, they stepped closer, the folder clutched tightly in their hands. "You can't hide from the past," they said. "It's time to pay for your choices." Their words hung in the air like a dark cloud, heavy and suffocating. I still remember the pounding of my heart, the electricity in the air, the sudden realization that everything I had thought was secure, my identity, my secrets, my carefully constructed life, was now at the mercy of someone who knew me better than I ever imagined. And then, in the midst of the tension, a sound came from the back of the courtroom. A soft, almost imperceptible click, like a camera shutter or a trigger. The entire room froze. The figure's head snapped toward the sound. My stomach twisted. I realized in that instant that this was only the beginning. Whatever was about to happen next would change everything. I still remember that day as though time itself had slowed to a crawl. The courtroom was electric with tension, every eye fixed on me, the figure with the folder, and the soft, ominous click that had echoed moments ago. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisted into knots, and every nerve in my body screamed at me to run. But I couldn't. I had come here to face the truth. And now the truth had transformed into something far more dangerous. The figure with the folder stepped forward again, their presence commanding, terrifying. "You thought revealing yourself would be enough?" they said, their voice calm but carrying a deadly weight. But the truth is never simple. The past always catches up. I could feel the room's tension building, thick and heavy like a storm cloud ready to break. Every person in that courtroom seemed to sense the danger, frozen in place. Unsure of where to look or what to do, I still remember the sound of my own breathing, loud and ragged, echoing in my ears. My hands were trembling, but I clenched them at my sides, forcing myself to stand tall. I had survived so much by keeping my life hidden, by carefully walking the line between exposure and secrecy. And now, with everyone watching, I had no choice but to confront not just the figure in front of me, but the full weight of my past. The woman in the third row had moved closer, her eyes sharp and alert. She was my only ally in the room, my silent warning system. But even she looked uncertain. She kept glancing between me and the figure as if calculating the next move. I felt a surge of gratitude and fear at the same time. Her presence reminded me that I wasn't completely alone. Yet it also highlighted just how precarious my situation had become. I still remember the way the figure opened the folder slowly, deliberately revealing photographs and documents that documented moments of my hidden life. Faces I had once trusted, names I had kept secret, events I had buried, they were all there, laid bare for everyone to see. Gasps rose from the crowd, whispers turning into murmurs of disbelief. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to focus. I had to remain calm, had to maintain control over the narrative, even as chaos threatened to overtake me. "You see," the figure said, "lifting a photograph, everything you thought you controlled was an illusion. People always see more than you think, and secrets have a way of finding the light." Their gaze locked onto mine, piercing and unrelenting. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The folder wasn't just evidence, it was power. And they held it like a weapon. I still remember the faint creak of the gallery seats as people leaned forward, trying to catch every detail. The judge's gavel was raised, but he didn't strike it. Even he seemed powerless against the tension that had overtaken the courtroom. I realized then that I had stepped into a moment where nothing could protect me except my own courage and quick thinking. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Yes, my past has shadows," I said, letting my words carry across the silent room. "Yes, there are things I have hidden, but I am here facing the truth, and I will not let fear control me." My gaze swept across the courtroom, landing briefly on the faces of those who had once doubted me, who had never suspected the life I had led. I saw shock, fear, curiosity, but also a glimmer of something else: understanding, maybe even empathy. I still remember the moment the figure took a step closer, the folder clutched tightly, their eyes narrowing. "Bravery is admirable," they said softly, "but it won't save you. You've made enemies and they've been waiting. You are not the only one who knows the truth." Sudden movement at the back of the courtroom caught my attention. The shadow from earlier or someone connected to it was shifting, closer now, blending into the crowd. My heart raced. I realized that the danger was no longer contained to the figure in front of me. The room itself had become a trap, and I had to find a way to survive this revelation, this confrontation, without losing everything I had fought to protect. I still remember the cold sweat running down my back, tension that made my knees weak. Every instinct screamed at me that I needed to act, to do something decisive. But what? The figure with the folder was dangerous. The mysterious presence in the back was unpredictable. and the courtroom had become a stage for something far beyond legal matters. It was a battlefield of secrets, lies, and power. Then, without warning, the figure slammed the folder onto the stand with a sharp crack. Papers flew, photos scattering across the polished floor. "Look at them," they shouted. "This is the life you've hidden, the truth you've tried to bury. And now everyone will see it." The room erupted into whispers and murmurs, the shock palpable. My heart pounded like never before. And I realized the moment of reckoning had arrived. I still remember the look in the woman's eyes as she moved closer to me again. Urgent, her hand brushing mine. She whispered just enough for me to hear, "You need to run. Now." And in that instant, I knew the choice I had to make. I could stay and face whatever consequences came next, or I could take a step into the unknown, risking everything to survive. I still remember that night like a shadow that refused to leave me. The warning from the woman echoed in my mind. Run. Now, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. I glanced around the courtroom, people frozen, staring at me, the figure with the folder glaring with intent, and the mysterious presence in the back moving closer. Everything felt unreal, yet terrifyingly immediate. I took a deep breath and made the decision. My legs moved before my mind fully registered it. I had to get out. Whatever had been unleashed here, the secrets, the threats, the hidden enemies, was beyond control. And if I stayed, I might lose everything, or worse. I still remember the sharp creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet as I began to move toward the exit, trying to appear calm while adrenaline surged through me like fire. The figure with the folder didn't stop me at first. Instead, they tilted their heads slightly, almost amused, as if they were testing me. "You think running will change anything?" they said, their voice calm but filled with menace. "The past doesn't chase you, carry it with you." Every word felt like a blade pressing against my chest. I kept walking, my eyes scanning for any way out, any escape. While my mind raced to anticipate what would happen next, I still remember the sudden rustle of papers behind me as the scattered photos from the folder slipped across the floor. They caught the light, glinting like shards of glass, reminding me of the fragile truth I was carrying, truths that, if exposed, could destroy lives. I forced myself to focus, to ignore the weight of it, and moved faster. The courtroom doors were just ahead, and I could see the woman slightly ahead of me, signaling silently that she was ready to help guide me out. Then, just as I reached the doors, the mysterious presence from the back of the courtroom stepped forward. I felt their gaze like ice on my skin. My stomach dropped. I realized with a jolt that escaping wasn't going to be as simple as I had hoped. They didn't move toward me aggressively, but the intent in their steps, the controlled precision, told me one thing. They knew exactly what I was going to do, and they were prepared to stop me. I still remember the pounding of my pulse as I tried the door locked. Of course, it was locked. Every instinct screamed at me to panic, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed a plan, and fast. My mind raced. There had to be another way out. The courthouse had more than one exit, though most were restricted. I would have to think fast and move faster. The figure with the folder moved toward me, slowly, deliberately, each step echoing ominously. "You can't hide anymore," they said. "Every choice you've made has led to this moment. And now the consequences are here." I felt a surge of fear, but beneath it, a spark of determination. I wasn't going to be caught without a fight. I had faced lies, secrets, and danger before. I could do it again. I still remember the whisper of the woman beside me. "Through the side corridor quickly. Follow me," without hesitation. I followed her, weaving through the crowd, ignoring the murmurs, the stares, the rising panic. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. The courthouse had become a maze, but she knew the way, and I trusted her implicitly as we neared the side corridor. I could hear the figure shouting behind us, but the sound was distorted, almost muffled by the adrenaline surging through me. I still remember the smell of the old building wood polish wax, and the faint metallic scent of fear, and how it mingled with the cold draft that swept through the corridor as we ran. It felt surreal, like being inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from. And then, Just as I thought we were about to escape, a shadow moved across the corridor ahead of us. A hand shot out, blocking our path. My heart froze. The Persanor thing was faster than I anticipated. Panic threatened to overtake me, but I forced myself to think, to react. I had no choice. Everything depended on what I did next. I still remember the sound of my own breath, ragged and fast, echoing in the corridor. I could feel the walls closing in, the weight of my past, the dangers that had followed me for years. Every instinct screamed at me to run, yet the moment demanded more than instinct, it demanded courage, quick thinking, and perhaps a little luck. The shadow stepped closer, and in that instant, I realized this was no ordinary opponent. Whoever or whatever stood before me, knew my secrets, and was ready to stop me at all costs. I had only one choice: act now or be trapped forever. I still remember that night as if it were carved into my bones. The corridor felt narrower than ever, the shadows stretching across the walls like fingers ready to grab me. My heart was pounding so fast I thought it might burst. And every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't. There was no going back. Everything I had revealed, everything I had risked, had led to this moment. And now danger was waiting, closer than I could imagine. The shadow blocking the corridor didn't move immediately. Whoever it was, they were patient, deliberate, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I could feel the tension radiating off them in waves. The woman beside me grabbed my arm, her grip firm, her eyes filled with urgency. "We have to act now," she whispered. "If we hesitate, it's over." I still remember the metallic scent in the air, the mingling of fear and anticipation, sweat and the faint scent of old wood. I could hear the soft shuffle of our footsteps against the stone floor, each one loud, echoing, announcing our presence. My mind raced, trying to think of an escape, a way past the shadow. Every scenario played out, every risk calculated, but none felt safe. None guaranteed survival. The shadow took a slow step forward, and I caught a glimpse of their face. It was familiar, too familiar. My stomach twisted. Recognition hit me like a thunderclap. I had thought this person long gone, someone from my past I had hoped to never see again. Yet here they were, standing in my path, holding a power over me I had never imagined. I still remember the sharp intake of my own breath. My pulse thundered in my ears. The folder, the evidence, the secrets. My life was still back in the courtroom. And yet this person had managed to corner me, block my path, and make it clear that there was no simple escape. Every instinct screamed that I was in serious danger. That one wrong move could end everything. The woman beside me leaned closer, her voice low and urgent. "I can't fight them for you. You have to do this yourself." Her eyes locked onto mine. There was a fear there I had never seen before, but also a trust, a belief that I could survive this, despite the odds. I nodded slightly, my jaw tightening, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I still remember the way the shadow's eyes glinted in the dim light, a mixture of recognition and menace. They smiled slightly, almost cruelly, and said, "You can't hide anymore. You've run long enough." Their voice was calm, but every word carried a threat, a promise that I couldn't ignore. I could feel the heat of their presence, the pull of the confrontation I had been avoiding for years. I took a deep breath and forced myself to step forward. "I'm not running anymore," I said, my voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. "Whatever it is you want from me, I'm facing it now." The shadow tilted their head, amused, but not threatened. I realized then that this wasn't just about fear. This was about power, control, and a reckoning that I couldn't avoid. I still remember the sharp sound of footsteps approaching from the far end of the corridor. Another presence, another threat. My heart sank. The woman beside me tensed, looking toward the sound. "There's more," she whispered. "We're not alone." Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to stay focused. I had to survive this. I had no choice. And then, just as I was preparing to confront the shadow in front of me, they made their move. A sudden, sharp motion, almost too fast to see, and I realized in horror that this encounter wasn't going to be a conversation. It was a FIDA battle for survival, for the secrets I had risked revealing. And perhaps for my very life, I still remember the fear, the adrenaline, the electric tension that made my muscles scream. I had faced difficult moments before, but nothing like this. The shadows, the unknown forces, the evidence of my hidden life, it all collided into one moment of pure danger. I knew that what happened next would determine whether I survived or became another secret buried forever. I still remember that night as if every second had been etched into my mind in fire. The shadow lunged, sudden and swift, and I barely had time to react. My pulse was pounding, my hands shaking, and adrenaline surged through me like lightning. I ducked instinctively, feeling the brush of movement just past my shoulder. My heart raced not just from fear, but from the realization that this was no ordinary threat. This was someone who knew me, knew my secrets, and wanted to control the outcome at any cost. The woman beside me shouted, urging me to move, and I followed instinctively. Darting down the corridor, my feet slapping against the cold stone floor. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner hiding danger. I still remember the sound of my own breath, ragged and loud, echoing in the narrow space. The mysterious figure pursued, silent but relentless. And I could feel the tension rising like a storm about to break. I still remember the metallic smell in the air, the faint echo of footsteps behind me, and the distant murmurs from the courtroom I had just fled. Somehow, the chaos I had left behind was trailing me here, haunting every step. The folder, the evidence of my life, my secrets was still back in that room. And I realized with a sinking heart that this confrontation wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the truth being exposed. Fully and irreversibly, I turned sharply into a side passage, hoping to find an exit, but the corridor narrowed. And I realized I was trapped. My pulse thundered in my ears. The shadow appeared again, emerging from the darkness with the quiet menace of someone who had been planning this for years. I still remember the look in their eyes, recognition, anger, and a dangerous certainty. They had waited for this moment, and now they had me exactly where they wanted. Stop. I shouted, my voice echoing. What do you want from me? The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Then, with a sudden, almost theatrical motion, they pulled back a mask, perhaps a hoodoo revealed their face. I froze. Recognition struck me like a physical blow. It was someone I had trusted once, someone I had thought gone forever. Betrayal and disbelief clashed in my chest. I still remember the flash of anger and pain in their eyes. The way it mirrored some of the fear I had carried for years. You thought you could hide forever, they said, voice low and dangerous. But you've made choices, and now everyone will see them. Everyone will know. I could feel the weight of every secret, every lie, every hidden decision pressing down on me. I still remember the sharp, metallic scent of fear in the corridor. The echo of my own heartbeat and the rush of memories flooding back times I had covered my tracks, hidden my identity, and tried to protect those I cared about. None of it mattered anymore. I took a deep, trembling breath. I didn't want to hurt anyone, I said, my voice shaking but determined. Everything I did was to survive, to protect, to prevent more pain. The shadow's expression softened slightly, but only for a moment, before hardening again. You call it protection, but it's all lies, they said. The truth can't be buried. It will always surface. I still remember the cold realization that hit me in that instant. They were right. My life, my secrets, my hidden identity had all been on borrowed time. The confrontation in this corridor was only the beginning. The truth was about to break through completely. And there was no turning back. Suddenly, a sound came from above, soft, almost unnoticed creak, like a loose tile shifting. I looked up and saw the faint shadow of someone watching from the balcony above. Another presence. Another threat. I felt panic surge through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. My only chance was to act decisively. I still remember the moment I lunged, ducked, and maneuvered through the corridor, trying to escape while the shadow pursued relentlessly. Every turn brought new danger, every step was a choice between life and exposure. And then at the end of the corridor, I saw it, a door slightly ajar leading to a narrow stairwell. I didn't hesitate. I pushed forward, praying it would be my way out, praying I could survive the final confrontation. But as I reached for the handle, I felt a hand close around my wrist, strong and unyielding. I spun around, heart in my throat, and froze. I still remember that night as if the shadows themselves had carved it into my memory. My wrist was gripped tightly, the hand of someone I had feared, someone I had thought I had escaped. My heart raced uncontrollably, and every instinct screamed at me to fight, to run, to survive. But I froze for a moment, caught between terror and realization. The person in front of me revealed their face fully this time. It was someone I had trusted deeply, a figure from my past whose betrayal had been my greatest wound. I still remember the shock that ripped through me. The truth of their identity, their motives, and the role they had played in my hidden life hit me like a thunderclap. All the years of secrecy, all the careful planning, had led to this inevitable moment. I took a deep breath, steadying my shaking hands. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "After everything, why?" Their eyes softened, briefly, with what looked almost like regret, but the hardness returned quickly. "You don't understand," they said. "I did this because someone had to hold you accountable. You've hidden in plain sight for too long. Now everyone must see who you really are." I still remember the flood of emotions, fear, guilt, sorrow, and finally, a strange sense of release. The confrontation I had feared for years was finally happening, and for the first time, I realized that facing the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way to survive it. In a sudden shift, the woman who had guided me through the courtroom appeared beside me. "Listen to me," she said urgently. "You can survive this, but you have to reveal yourself fully. No more hiding, no more secrets. It's time to take control of your story." I still remember the way her words struck me. They weren't just advice, they were a lifeline. The courtroom, the corridors, the shadows, the threats they had all brought me to this one truth: honesty, courage. And facing the past head on was the only way to move forward. I took another deep breath and faced the person holding my wrist. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled free, looking them in the eye. "You're right," I said. "It's time to stop running. It's time to tell the world everything." The figure stepped back, almost in disbelief. The woman beside me smiled faintly, and I felt a strange sense of power strength I hadn't realized I still had. I walked toward the stairwell, the doorway that would lead me out of this nightmare. With every step, I felt the weight of my secrets lighten, the fear slowly giving way to determination. I still remember the moment I reached the courthouse doors. Sunlight streamed in, warm and real, contrasting sharply with the darkness of the night I had endured inside. People outside stopped and stared, but I no longer felt the need to hide. I had faced my past, confronted my enemies, and survived the truth. And most importantly, I had reclaimed my life. The courtroom, the figure, the shadowy threats, they were all part of my story now. But I had turned the tide. I understood that life was never just about hiding or running. It was about courage, about standing in the face of fear and owning the truth, no matter how shocking or painful it might be. I still remember that feeling of relief, of empowerment as I walked away. I had survived the confrontation, revealed my secrets, and, for the first time in years, felt free. And I knew that this story, though painful, was something that could inspire others to face their own truths, to confront their fears, and to find the courage to stand tall. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps me continue sharing true life stories full of mystery, emotion, and suspense. And remember, no matter how dark your past may seem, facing it with courage can set you free.